to the studio. Today I'm going to cover space and shape. The element space refers to the height, width, and depth of any area that we create art in. In a sculpture, it will relate to the height, the width, and the depth of the sculpture. In a painting, it refers to the height, the width, and the interactive depth. The same thing applies really to sculpture. There is an interactive depth that you have to observe. Space may be busy, or it may be calm. It may be active, or exhilarating, or it may be relaxing. And we have to take that into consideration in both placing a piece of art, in considering a piece of art. If you have a very active piece that needs a lot of interpretation, you don't want to put it in a real small corner in a otherwise busy room, or it can't interact properly with the viewer. Same way with a painting. Calm paintings go in tighter spaces, and busier paintings go in a little larger spaces so that people can back off and really look at them. There's also a consideration of open and closed. An open artwork is one that is inviting. In a sculpture or a portrait, if it affronts you and invites you to interact, as in eye contact, or as in a lifted head and an open position, or as an animal coming forward with its head up. Again, eye contact is a big deal. In this, if you have a vehicle or something like that, if it is affronting, it's considered an open work. If this view is more from the side, and or in a portrait, the head is down or the eyes are averted, the body is more tight, close together, that's considered a closed work. In different kinds of landscapes, if you have a horizontal barrier in the lower part of the landscape, it will be considered closed. If you have something that leads you back into the work, that's considered open. Say you have a fence right in the front, that's going to be considered a closed work most of the time. If you have a road that goes across the front, or a river, or a bank that comes horizontal across the front, that's going to be considered closed. If you have a road going back into the work, that's going to be considered open because it invites you in. If you have a stand of trees and there's room between the trees and light is coming forward or something like that, then that's more of an open piece of artwork. It leads you back into the work. And all of those things are basics that we consider when we're talking about space. The second element I want to cover is shape. There are several things to consider in shape. We basically are going to talk about 4 different categories of shapes. The first is a circle, and it would include ovals and such as that. Cylinders that you can see the top on and such as that would be considered circular shapes. The circular shape is a very stable shape. Even though you can go around it and it seems like it would be less stable because of its roundness, it's actually more stable. I'm just rounding that just a little bit more. But it's actually more stable because the line does not actually end. Now, of course, I had a starting place and an ending place, and we have a little reminder of that right here at the top of the circle. But as a whole, a ring, the moon, of these shapes don't really have a beginning and an end. And so they are considered a very, very stable shape. It's also considered a very active shape. And we will be looking at all of these through activity and stability. Because both of those have a lot to do with how we use a shape in an artwork. This is a stable, active shape. When you turn it into an oval, it loses a little bit of its stability and a little bit of its activity. But as a whole, circular shapes are very active and very stable. The next shape we're going to consider is a rectangular shape. And there are a lot of variations on our rectangular shape. This is a square. It has horizontal, vertical, and square. Also, in this shape family are those trapezoids and all of that kind of stuff that changes the angle a little bit one way and another, and yet they're still in this family. Now I'm going to go over the characteristics because all 3 of these have a little different characteristic. In the square, our characteristic is somewhat stable. More stable than unstable, but with the corners being points of possibility, then we lose a little bit of stability in that. So it is a fairly stable shape, the most stable of the 3, and it is a very inactive shape. So I'll just put an IA. It's an inactive shape, stable and inactive. For the vertical, It also is fairly stable, again, reduced from the circle slightly by the corners, and it becomes a stable inactive. And it is a little more active than the shape right here, and a little less stable because of the height. However, it's considered a very strict shape, like this vertical line is considered a strict line. The vertical rectangle is considered a very strict shape. It's not very giving. It's not very pliable, so to speak, but it's still considered inactive and stable. The horizontal is the most inactive, and it is also stable. So all of the rectangular pieces are stable and inactive. Now then, when we come in and we change, say, a glass, this becomes less stable, just almost unstable, but not quite, and it becomes a whole lot more active. So you can kind of look at the shapes and you'll get where I'm going, I think. The next shape I want to handle is a triangle. Triangles that are set on the surface, their straight line is set on horizon, are considered, or on the surface, which is always considered a horizontal line. Even if it has variations in it, it will be considered a horizontal line. A triangle that is set on that surface is considered the more stable and the less active. However, because it has 3 points, less stable still than the square and more active than the square. If we go the other direction and we put the point down, this is still stable but active. This one is unstable and active, very strongly active. Any point that is not upward, any point that meets the horizontal, is considered very active and very unstable in a triangle. So those 3 shapes are pretty geometric, it's pretty much cut and dried, but there's one more shape, and this shape really depends on how it's used and exactly what it is. It is a random shape. And when you have a random shape, it is totally dependent on your shape, whether it is stable, unstable, active, inactive. It will never be as stable as the circle, and it will never be as stable as the square. But it can be a very stable piece. On this one, what you have are 2 points that interact with the horizontal, and so you have somewhat of a stable piece. If you had, say that way, it has very little interacting with the horizontal, and it has the weight of the object is kind of in the air, and it becomes more unstable and very active, very active. So here we have stable, active, and here we have unstable, active. And that kind of explains to you what shapes do. Now then, when we are drawing a picture, composing a painting, composing a sculpture, or anything like that. Now, buildings, that's takes on a little more of a dimension. Though there was a building in Dallas that I don't know if it's still there or not, but it was right downtown in the busy area of Dallas, and the angle came in from the top to the bottom, and it made the building very, very look very unstable, look very like it could topple. You knew it wasn't going to topple. It was made out of the right materials, and it was properly cantilevered, but it gave you that visual effect of instability. That's cool. Most buildings don't, for good reason. The taller a building is, the more unstable the mind makes it. But that doesn't mean it's unstable. It just, the mind makes it less stable. So those are things that we consider when we're putting things together. That activity is sometimes exactly what we're for, and sometimes it's not. And that instability, that kind of a pull on the nervous system, sometimes it's exactly what we want, sometimes it's not, and you have to be able to analyze what is being done, how it's being done, and the effect that it has on the mind of the viewer when you're using, buying, evaluating, creating any kind of artwork or extremely creative venture. You have to think about the line you're creating, the shapes and what they do, and the space, whether you are creating something that is going to be claustrophobic and enclosing. Sometimes that's nice, sometimes it's not. Or whether you're creating something that is free and open and maybe doesn't give you as much support mentally. Sometimes that's nice and sometimes it's not. You have to weigh those kind of things. I'm going to show you how shape is used in this context in drawing, using these shapes to create items. The first thing I'm going to show you is the earliest, or one of the earliest paintings I do with some students. Some I go a little different direction because of their interest and stuff, and that's just fine. But this is one of my go-to early drawings, and it is a very stable triangle with a very stable rectangle. Now we're going to start with this, and some of you may guess right offhand that we're dealing with a sailboat. We're going to come to this side, and we're going to make this the front, and we're going to put a triangle inverted on that, and that is going to create a little less stability in this bottom, visually speaking. On this side, we're going to come and put a triangle out that way. Not quite as sharp a triangle as is on this side. We're going to slightly bend downward, and we're going to slightly bend upward. there. And we'll take care of that later. I'm going to take this middle line out. We're going to come up on this one and forward and across for the nest to attach. We're going to leave this one right down low, and we're going to bring this one up a little bit higher and bring this out just a little bit. And we're going to come round it slightly that way, round it slightly this way. When this one is taken out, you can still see the effect of the triangle, but you can also see that that has loosened up a lot. And we're going to make a little flag. It's coming forward because the wind is obviously blowing that direction, and so we're getting that. We can come in here and put a person, and usually I do with my students, put a person, and one of the resources I have has a dog in here, you know, we put all kinds of fun things in there. But this is using shape, moving out that way. If you make a reflection, the reflection has to honor what's going on up here. So the reflection comes in to a point like that. If we're doing water, sometimes we'll come in and make little lines through that reflection to break it up and give ourselves a sense of the movement of the water. You can give yourself just a little bit of bird activity. And in the air with just some little lines there. And you can put a back horizon line, which is the water's edge, and some stuff for the hill in the distance, which gives you the feeling of a landmass back there. And it can go on, but you get the idea of it. Another early drawing I like to do is the drawing of a waterfowl. And for a waterfowl, you have two lines. This is the float line. This is for a waterfowl in water, on water, yeah. If you take it out of the water, then angles change and all that. And I'm not going to cover that right now. But if we draw a circle right there, we can come up above it and draw a smaller circle. Then we want to come back, and we want to start here in the middle, come up and back down. Then we want to come, and generally this line will come close to the top of this circle. Then we want to come here and we want to come in and back like so. This comes back in, and if you have curls as on the mallard, they're going to come in right there. On the front, we're going to bring this in and back out, and this is going to come slightly in and back out as well. I'm going to take this line and this line off, and then right here we're going to have the that needs to come a little more out. That's maybe a little bit fast. We make a little triangle-y line coming in like that. A little eye right here to the side. And that beak is humongous. But you get the idea. I'd be watching it a lot more. If it was a mallard, you'd have a white line right there. and you kind of see what's going on with the bird at that point. This is, by the way, called the balance line, and when you're doing other waterfowl, the balance line changes. For instance, in a swan, the balance line is in the front, and you have this down. You have a circle, the beak, the neck, and the circle down here, up and down, and you have the basics for the swan. This circle is a little bit on the large side, but you see the basics for the swan right there. If you are using a goose configuration, then the line is going to go in the middle of the circle. The head is going to be higher up and in the middle of that. The beak is going to tend to come a little more straight out from it. This is going to come in, this is going to come out, and we get the goose configuration. We've got this sits right up here on the top, and this sits right down here on the bottom, and we have the goose configuration. So waterfowl are kind of interesting, and I've always enjoyed doing them. But you see how we use the circles, the different kinds of shapes to get where we're going. Okay, the next one we're going to start with is going to be a rectangle. But we're not going to end up with a rectangle. We're just going to start with it. And we're going to come not quite halfway down, and we're going to form a triangle. Not quite halfway down. Then we're going to come down just a little bit below this, and we're going to come with just a loop downward. There we go. We're going to come from this side just a little bit out and up and out and down. We'll work with this just a little bit. We've got this, which is the ears. We've got this, which comes down here, and my chalk is kind of resisting my ability to do this. Not too, just almost square right on that. This comes inward like that. Small eye, about halfway between the top of this and the top of the head. Then we can start taking those lines and things loose. This can come down, and this can come out and around with a foot forward. This can come out and down with a foot forward, right in there. This comes down a little higher with a foot forward, and we don't really get much of this back right in there, and we have the configuration for a bear. And yeah, we have lines in there but you can see how it all goes together to make that happen. We also have a place up here right above it where the back just kind of comes, the first part of the back comes back in and fits into that, and then the back end of the bear kind of goes back from there. Line right about here if you want to deal with that. We don't need to go that far, but you can kind of see what we've got happening there. There are a lot of others, and I could go on and on with this. I have tons of examples of triangles and squares and circles, and how they work together. And I will probably do a painting and add it on after this of using shape and space together to create a feeling. Thank you for joining me today in the studio for this presentation of space and shape. And I hope you'll join me again for the painting, and then for the next presentation, which will be on value and form.